now.
Okay, all right. Welcome everybody to People Policy Development Committee for, what are we, October? Yeah. So the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Jan Curtis and Erica Kirshner. And as you said, Councillor Paxton Williams will be a couple of minutes late.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Second item on the agenda, disclosures of personal prejudicial interests. I don't think there are any. Nobody's indicated that. And then the third item is minutes of the previous meeting, which were in September, obviously. Somebody happy to move those?
Move.
Thanks, Lindsay. And somebody happy to second that?
Yeah, second those, Chair.
Sorry, can I scratch that? I wasn't there.
Okay. Well, you can move them, Matthew.
I'm sure it was correct. That's why I'm saying that she says, trying to scuttle out of it. Apologies.
Yeah, I'll move those minutes then, Chair.
And I'll second it. That's fine. Okay. So we're on to the agenda item. All the items are verbal today, partly because obviously we had the workshop for the volunteering strategy just before we came on here. In terms of the Children and Young People's Rights Scheme, unfortunately, Katie Spendiff was due to was due to come on today to give us an update, but she's got COVID, and so at short notice isn't able to come, and obviously it's half term, so that the people who would either otherwise have come in short notice are also on leave. So I see Hannah's joined us as well. So we don't have an update there. So we've been forced really to push that until to next month. So hopefully, Katie, we will be well enough next month to come in November and tell us, give us an update on where we are with the Children and Young People's Rights Scheme. In terms of the volunteering strategy, obviously some of us have just come straight from the workshop, which was really interesting. And Julia is here from SCVS. So Julia, would you mind just giving us a quick update of what we discussed in the workshop and what the next steps are?
Of course, Chair. So we have, as Chair has said, we've just come from a volunteering strategy workshop which took place for an hour on Teams. Amy Hawkins started the workshop. I gave some information about volunteering management best practice and such like in the middle. And James Mullin, who is the Swansea Council officer steering this work, took the floor later. He's from Tackling Poverty team. And it kind of set out really that there are volunteering strategies in other local authorities. Monmouthshire was named. And that Swansea is now looking, as we know, to develop a volunteering strategy to enable the practice that goes on within Swansea Council to be a corporate approach, and for more care to be taken in certain areas, for example. There were lots of officers that were present at the workshop who have got responsibility for managing volunteers within their departments. As you'll be aware, that there are hundreds of volunteers who have been volunteering within Swansea Council for many years, some of them within, for example, education or within culture. But at the workshop, there were some colleagues that were representing St John's Day centres, some that were representing libraries, some that were representing workways. And there was a good discussion about how staff time has been used in the past to provide support and supervision to volunteers undertaking, if you like, Swansea Council service work. And there's obviously really pockets of really good practice, but those practices have been developed sort of ad hoc within those departments. And the idea of the volunteering strategy really is to make a consistent approach, perhaps using the same sort of paperwork or policies or procedures. Reimbursement of expenses was mentioned in terms of affording volunteers their travel costs. And during the workshop, there were some very fancy interactive tools used to poll some straightforward questions to get yes or no, and there seemed broadly a support for the volunteering strategy just on the first ask. but also some queries about how other things may work as the volunteering strategy work unfolds. And then James really sent on to the people that were involved in the workshop some more open-ended questions via a poly system, which was aimed to get experience really from the officers, I think, that manage volunteers. And then James asked, were people interested in being part of a working group which will move this discussion forward and will enable the volunteering strategy of Swansea Council to be co-produced? That's my verbal summary, and I apologise if I've missed out anything important. I'm sure that somebody would be able to add that detail.
Okay, thanks, Julia. That's really helpful. Thanks for the minutes as well, particularly. So thanks for that. I know there's a couple of guys that were on the meeting. I know Leslie and Hannah contributed a fair bit towards the end of that meeting. Is there anything that you'd want to add that we think the minutes should reflect from the meeting? I know it's a little bit awkward because we've done the workshop before the meeting, but is there anything that you think that would be useful to say so that the minutes can capture that, or are you happy with what Julia said?
Personally, I'm very happy with what Julia said. I'm very pleased with Julia's contribution at the workshop. That was excellent. Maybe just to say that I think we all realise it's not perhaps as straightforward as it sounds, that the complication of trying to match up the council with CVS, I think it's got to be carefully handled. But I think we all know that. It's not like that's going to be an obstacle to stop it. That's just something that, as long as we're aware of, we can deal with it and overcome it, and hopefully come out with a single strategy and a single point of contact, which will work well in the future.
Okay,
I think that's about it. That I probably said lots of other bits and pieces, but I think that will do. Thanks.
Okay. Steve, you have your hand up? You come in?
Yeah, I contributed or tried to contribute on electronically, and found that quite useful, even though I've never answered to a parrot before. So I found that even more useful. And I know there have been concerns about having a database, but I'm also, I'm a former senior police officer. I do have concerns about not having some sort of database in relation, one, to making sure that the volunteers that we use, is the old round hole, round peg syndrome, so that both sides get value of the system, as well as safeguarding and protection. And I know, Julie, you mentioned safeguarding and protection is the utmost. I think we just got to be careful how we achieve that to ensure that, we are okay. Other than that, I think it's a great idea, because youngsters, well, not only youngsters, they could be any age, can get some real valid experience from officers who they may not normally come into contact with. That's me.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, before I bring Julie in, Simon, you indicated, do you still want to come in, or?
Well, it was only that what came through in the discussion really was the spectrum really of volunteering, from informal to formal, and we tend to talk more about the formal elements of it. And what was clear from the discussion was we have to be really careful that we don't deter people from doing the informal stuff by making it overly regulated, which is our tendency as a bureaucracy, isn't it? So it's a fine balance really, and I guess what we were looking at really, I know from my personal experience, and I've been volunteering for years and things like that. The example of people being asked for their names and addresses, everybody disappears, don't they, really? Because they don't want to be beholden to anything. It's just the goodwill, really, isn't it? And so I think it's a delicate situation that needs to be handled carefully, I think, isn't it?
Thanks, Simon. Julia, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting discussion about the formal and the informal, when somebody's doing a one-off opportunity or something where it's not required to have their details, there being that flexibility that's something we can do. And I think Councillor Steve Gallagher's point there about, if people are volunteering on a more longer term basis, let's say within service, like we're talking about the day centres, where people have access to people that we would have described previously as vulnerable, or having access to children, for example. I think we'd expect that a council would have some sort of easy way of saying who was volunteering and who those persons were, and when did that person have their last safeguarding training, do they need a refresher, not to put steps in the way, but just to afford the service users a little bit of certainty that they are getting the quality of service. And from a workforce development, and this has been my last point, and from a workforce development point of view, if you've got some details about the amount of training courses that we would provide for our volunteers, a little list about, you know, Julia's been on this, that and the other, you are able to put a reference together for somebody that may really enable them to get that step on the ladder, which says, you know, they have done this kind of role, they have had safeguarding training, they have supported people for 4 years, 3 months. And it's that kind of detail that formal volunteering opportunities are very good at doing. And I'm not suggesting that if somebody was doing a litter pick, they would probably ask for a reference. But if somebody has been supporting day centres for 4 years, it would be, I would have thought it'd be completely reasonable for somebody to ask for a reference to get a paid job in the care sector, because gosh, we need them right now in the care sector.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Les?
Yeah, just really following on from that, I think going back to the database, yes, I think there are some positives for long-term volunteers in that it verifies what work they've been doing. And as you just said, perfect example of giving them a leg up into paid employment if that's the route they want to take. Whereas if they're not on any kind of list or there's no data, they can go along to an interview and say, oh, I've been volunteering. Oh, can you prove you've been volunteering? Oh, no, but you've got to just trust me. Whereas being on a proper database with information backing up in that respect, then it's quite useful for them to be on a database. But it's just, as Steve said earlier, we've just got to be careful and very sensitive about how we put it together, basically. Thanks.
That's nice. Hannah, did you want to add anything, or has everybody covered what you were going to say?
Yeah, I think a lot of things have been covered. The only other thing I'd probably add is to thank Julia for such a great presentation on the document and how heartened I was from it. I think, you know, volunteering in that respect has come along a lot way from some of the volunteering that maybe I've experienced in my life. You know, I have been in workplaces before that did not have good volunteering policies, and that occasionally there was friction between paid staff and volunteers. And I think that has been looked at very, very carefully in this document is, you know, really, really encouraging to me. And, you know, that the fact that it's very clear from the outset that we're not using volunteers to substitute for paid staff or to go against paid staff in any way, or even to take away jobs within certain roles that are maybe more interesting or more of a career development path, and that are sometimes given to interns. And, you know, you see this kind of thing, and then there builds up a bit of resentment within the workforce that why aren't I able to do that? Why aren't I being given time in my workplace to develop myself in that way? So yeah, I just really like to thank Julia for putting those aspects as well, that it has to be a good fit for the volunteer and it has to be a good fit for the workplace. And those two things I think are really, really important.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Hannah. Pax, I see you've joined us. Is there anything that you want to add about that you took from the workshop, Pax, and that you think would be good to feed into the sort of formally recorded in the minutes?
You caught me on the hop now, Gary. It's not fair, that isn't. Basically, I think it's obviously what we were talking about was helping people that the council is aware of as much as anything else, rather than anything outside. Obviously, SCVS and the third sector has got a major role in that anyway, and obviously we need to be coordinating there. And certainly, if Monmouthshire have got a good good process in this respect, then obviously it's worth looking at and see what we can pick up. I always think whatever we can learn from other people, so be it. It's got to be good.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, thanks for that, everybody, and thanks for the workshop, Julia. And the thing that struck me in it was there's clearly a need to look at having a strategy in Swansea, given everything that we've just talked about and all the kind of disparate approaches to volunteering across departments in Swansea. Can't be a good thing, can it? I think that just in terms of sharing information, sharing practice, it can only be a good thing. And also, something that struck me from was in your part of the workshop, Julia, where you talked about the volunteering shouldn't be a response to crisis, that it should be properly planned. And obviously, we've seen the benefit of volunteering in a crisis in recent times. So I think we've got to learn from that, I think, haven't we, and be better prepared perhaps in the future. And a part of that is this strategy for sure, isn't it? It is a response to the learning from that crisis, and I think that's really positive, and it can only be a good thing, I think, personally. In terms of the just for the minutes, Alison, in terms of the next steps, I know that from the council's perspective, it's James Mullins who's leading on the strategy, with Julia's support from an SCVS perspective. And the next step is to put a working group together of some of the people that were on that workshop, because it was a mixture of officers and members. So that's going to be the next step. And I was just going to raise that it would be good to have somebody from the committee sitting on that working group if we could, I think. I mean, obviously I'd be happy to go and sit on that, but it doesn't have to be the chair. It can be any one of us, really. But probably not all of us. We're all very busy people, I know. So, I mean, but if there's somebody, if there's one of you as members who would particularly like to go on that, isn't already chairing scrutiny groups and things like that, and you've got particular interest in this, then let us know, and let Julia know, and James, and I'm sure we can arrange for you to sit on that working group and then feed back to us as well, then from a member perspective. But so have a think anyway. I won't put you on the spot now. Let us know via email if that's what you want to do. If not, I probably will try and sit on it myself. So that we have got representation there, because I think it's really important the members are represented there.
Can I just ask one point, Kerry, just in that interest, in terms of I mentioned CVs, the Swansea Council of Voluntary Services a minute ago. We've got community councils across the rural areas of Wales, and we are all volunteers in that sense. Yeah. And we have been supporting people in our communities. So I don't know whether there's any way that we can work perhaps with community councils, and in the urban areas perhaps more if there's resident associations.
That's a good question.
It's just a thought that you might like to pick up on and have a think about.
Okay. I mean, I think some of these questions are going to probably be answered in that working group, and in terms of the scope of who's going to be covered in that, because certainly in some of the community councils, like in Mumbles and in Clydach, then obviously they would they'd fall under the umbrella of the council, wouldn't they? Presume potentially. So I don't know how that would work. Is my answer to that. Paxton, maybe we could take that to the working group, Julia.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm happy to raise that point and bring that point up. I'm sorry, briefly I fell out of the meeting, but I jumped back in as soon as I was able. And thanks very much for having me as a guest always. And it's really interesting to hear the discussions that we have. So I look forward to seeing you or somebody or lots of people at the working group.
Thanks, Julia. I really appreciate it.
So I can drop out. I can drop out again now, but at least I can say bye this time. So okay. Apologies and bye. Lovely to see everybody. All the best.
Okay. Take care.
Take care. Thank you.
Ta-ra.
Okay, so we're on to agenda item 6 then, which is the young carer strategy. So Agisha from YMCA has got an event on today, so can't be here. And I know Gavin's been off unwell, but I have got an update. I had a discussion with Gavin about where we are with the young carer strategy. I'm just going to open the email so I can read what he said. Okay, so in terms of the young carer strategy, there's been a further meeting of the Young Carers Forum and a discussion about how they can work into the strategy. So as a result of that, they've applied for some funding. So the group themselves have applied for some funding to support them to develop the strategy in partnership with the council and with us. So this includes a residential weekend with them to enable them to have a significant amount of time together, alongside some activities that they will plan themselves. They felt that this would give them the best opportunity to have sufficient time to dedicate to working on the strategy. So the decision on the funding will come through this week. Gavin says they're pretty confident, and they will hold the residential this side of Christmas. They will then consult on this with a wider group of young carers to ensure as many people have their voice in the process as possible. Young Carers Days towards the end of January, and they discussed the potential of being able to launch it on that day. Okay, so effectively, going forward, hopefully the decision on the funding will be this week. They'll hold the initial residential before Christmas. Then they'll open that up to people who didn't come on the residential to get their views on it, and they're hoping to have potentially use a Young Carers Day towards the end of January to launch the strategy. Okay, so that's where we are with the young carer strategy, really. So there's some movement there, and the timeline looks pretty positive in terms of it being quite medium term, really. So, any questions or any comments about that particular item? No. Okay. So again, spoke to Gavin about excuse me, my phone's going. About potential of, again, one of us or more of us attending that participation day if the young carers feel that's appropriate. I know they'd spoken about myself going, but again, it doesn't need to be me. It can be somebody else representing the committee with the young people. So again, if you've got a particular interest in that and you'd like to attend that, then please let me know via email or whatever, and Gavin, and we can arrange that then. Okay, that seems pretty straightforward. So short meeting this month because of Katie not being very well, and the workshop taking place beforehand. Any comments or questions or anything about where we are with the work plan, or any of the agenda items from today? Okay, if not, I think, what's the date of the next meeting, Alison?
The date of the next meeting is on, let us say on the agenda, let me just...
24th of November.
24th of November, yeah. So sorry, can I just go back to the work plan? So because we didn't have Katie's item today, that's rolling over to the next meeting. Yeah. And we've also got the financial assessment guidance that I think Amy Hawkins wants to bring. Are we just having those two items on the agenda, or do you want to add any updates?
Yeah, the young carers one, because we hope we'll have had an update on that by then.
Okay, so the 3 items, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, lovely.
Okay, that's great. If there's no more comments or questions, then thanks very much for your attendance, both in the workshop and in the committee. Les, do you want to come in?
Yeah, just a quickie. Back on the work plan. Might not need anything in detail, but again, let's keep on top of this volunteering strategy. So can we just have a sort of quick update? Nothing heavy going, but just so we know what's happening.
Yeah, great. No, that's a good point.
Thanks.
Okay, lovely. Thanks everybody for your contributions. Thanks for attendance, and I'll see you next week, Alison. Thanks for your help as usual.
No worries.
Bye all.
See you guys. All the best.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.
Ta-ra.